Seems like the story of Jeffrey Dahmer continues on Netflix, and I'm here to talk about it. My name is Brandon Keith Avery, and this is just my opinion. Hey, what's going on, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Just My Opinion for my conversations with a killer, the Jeffrey Dahmer tapes. Guys, I do want to let you know that this is going to be a spoiler-filled recap. I'm going to spoil it as if you've already seen it. And if you happen to like this video, please give me a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. And yes, guys, Jeffrey Dahmer is the topic of the day. These shows, these series, these documentaries keep popping up on Netflix. And like I said in my intro, I'm here to talk about it. But I don't want to confuse you. This is not the Dahmer monster, the Jeffrey Dahmer story that debuted on Netflix on September the 21st that has a total of 10 episodes. That was more of a show. This is a documentary, and it's giving you the information that was on the tapes that has never been released to the general public before. And so I just want to make sure that you are not confused there. Now, I did do one episode on my channel discussing the Dahmer monster that has 10 episodes, and I've talked about episodes right there, episode 1, excuse me. And I do plan on talking about each episode. I'm going to go back and do 2, 3, all the way up to 10. So if you're interested in that and you want to hear my commentary, that is a reason why you could subscribe to my channel. But right now, I am going to focus on the conversation with a killer, the Jeffrey Dahmer tapes, this documentary right here. And just to let you know, I've only seen the first episode of this one right here, and I've only seen one episode of Dahmer. And I will say, after seeing one episode of each series of each show on Netflix, right now the documentary is much more easier to stomach. The Dahmer one, the 10 episode one, make sure that you are not eating or drinking anything while you're watching that, because you just may get sick to your stomach and head and just get a very, very uncomfortable feeling. I did love the first episode out of both series. I found them fascinating. And Dahmer committed his first murder with Stephen Hicks in 1978. And then 9 years later, his second murder was Stephen Tomey in 1987. And of course, he was caught in 1991 and put to justice, and I believe was put to death in 94 in prison. Thank you, forever, who did that. But this was a great first episode of this series, just focusing on the case and them trying to figure out exactly who Jeffrey Dahmer was and why he did that. And when I say the people who are trying to figure it out, we have the cast right here of these lovely people that was trying to solve this case. We have Wendy Patricus. She was Dahmer's self-defense attorney. And she was just going into detail of how this was her first case ever in this town. And she was a new attorney, very young, in her 20s, and did not know what she had in front of her. It ended up being, of course, the biggest story in Milwaukee at that time and possibly in the country. You know, Jeffrey Dahmer is known as one of the most craziest serial killers out there, to my understanding. If I'm incorrect, let me know. And she just went on to say that how she tried to maintain the relationship with Dahmer and make sure that it was healthy because she wanted to get enough information out of him as possible. And he was very upfront with everything he did. He did not hold back or deny anything. He was confessed pretty much everything that he did. And at one point in the documentary went on to say with another prosecutor, with another forensic psychiatrist, that he wanted to figure out why he was the way he was. And that sometimes he did have remorse when he would kill his victims, but sometimes he wouldn't. But I want to let you know that this series, in my opinion, does not try to empathize with the character at all or give you sympathy. And that is the title of the first episode, Sympathy for the Devil. Attorney, experts, and journalists recall Jeffrey Dahmer's 1991 arrest and trace the beginnings of the horrifying murders he ultimately confessed to. And as we're going through this, the cast is great. Like I said, you have Wendy Patricus, Ann Schwartz, Kenneth Small. Michael Russ was a friend of the victims that he rained terror on, and we're going to be talking about him later on in this episode. Gerald P. Boyle, he was also Dahmer's lead defense attorney in this, and he said that Dahmer really didn't have a defense in this because he confessed everything. And Mr. Gerald here said in the documentary was, hey, I can't do anything for you, but what I can do is this. I can possibly get you the insanity plea, but I need to get as much information from you as possible to see if a doctor, to see if a professional would sign off on this. And when they're going back throughout the editing between Gerald and Wendy trying to figure this out, they were just trying to determine if this man was insane or insane, if he was guilty of his crimes or he was not. And I'm glad that we got the conclusion that we did in the end, because I don't think that we should be sympathizing or empathizing with this person, Jeffrey Dahmer, at all. But this is just the mindset at the very beginning of this case as they're trying to shift through all the information. E. Michael McCain was the lead prosecutor in the series as well. Dennis Murphy, Jeff Fleming, everybody here has something phenomenal to say and added great depth to the documentary. I loved it, and I learned a lot from everybody here. And what's also interesting for me the most, and they did delve into this in the documentary, especially this first episode, is one reason why I like it so much is, of course, like everybody else, I want to know why. Why did you do this? What caused this type of behavior? So many people do go through things, that do go through trauma in life, but just what happens to a person in a person that will make them go down the path of a racial, sexual, mass murdering rampage that destroys many, many lives in the community of Milwaukee. I mean, I just wanted that question answered. And you would think, okay, this person must have been beat, molested, raped, abandoned, tortured, times 10 combination of all those things. But that's not the case here. After watching this first episode, I'm summing it up to be Jeffrey Dahmer was a young boy that had some trauma with his parents as far as him seeing some forms of domestic violence, the mother and the father always fighting, bickering back and forth. And it does go into his childhood, talking about how there was always arguing. His mother was the one that was always hitting the father. She was the one being abusive, and they did say that that bothered him, that did affect him in a negative way. His father was also very absent out of the household. He was a scientist trying to provide, but was always out of town. And so when his parents were there, there was always fighting. But when there was no fighting, his dad was gone on away on business. They also said that growing up, Jeffrey Dahmer just really didn't have any friends. They went into an interview with an old childhood friend of his just saying, hey, I lived across the street from Dahmer. Our driveways was right across the street from each other. So if we wanted to hang out, we would just hop on our bikes and zoom across the street. But other than that, I don't remember Jeffrey Dahmer having any friends. He was always alone, especially did not talk to any girls. And I found that interesting too. They also said that when he was 6 years old, that's when his younger brother was born. And then all of the information, or not the information, excuse me, all of the attention from the parents was shifted to the younger brother. So he didn't have anywhere to vent to or an outlet as far as his parents was concerned. His dad was always gone, but when they was there, they was always fighting. He didn't have any friends and just developed zero social skills. And that's crazy. They said that by the time that he hit 13 years old, by the time he hit puberty, that's when he knew his sexuality or his sexual orientation, that he was gay or homosexual. And he didn't really have his first sexual experience until he was about 14 or 15 years old, to where he was kissing another neighborhood boy in some treehouse. And it was nothing more than kissing and laying around for a number of hours. But when he was 18 years old, that's when the sexual fantasies just started to bubble up inside of him. And he had no experience. He had no social skills. He did not know how to possibly or properly court somebody to fulfill these fantasies. I mean, I'm not here to judge anybody for whatever sexual fantasies you have. And if you want to carry those out, as long as it's constructive, not hurting anybody, and everybody involved is consensual. And unfortunately, that was not the case here. He was very fascinated with the male physique and the male body, not the person, just the torso of the male, and just wanting to get to know that anatomy on a sexual level. He knew that at one point in time, he even stated, and we're hearing this in the tapes, that he didn't want to be gay. And I'm kind of jumping around now, so I'll backpedal just a little bit. And there was his first victim that he sought out was a jogger. And he did not know how to approach the situation, but wanted to fulfill these urges and hid behind a tree and was going to knock him out. But luckily, the jogger did not go down the track that day and escaped without even being there. And so Jeffrey Dahmer just abandoned that whole idea. But that was when he was about to play out these sexual fantasies that he was starting to have in his younger adult years. And when you're watching this right here, especially, not everybody, but you can really tell that some of the people, the investigators, the reporters, the news anchors, the defense attorneys, etc., that they're very passionate about talking about this because it's so bizarre. I mean, hopefully we don't ever get any type of incident like this ever again in the world. I don't want any serial killing rapists to pop up ever again, man or woman, black, white, whatever. But they were just so shocked of this story, and this happened years ago, decades ago, but now they get to retell the story again, and you can tell that they're just salivating at the mouth just to express all these ideas that they've been having for so long. Even if they did express themselves during all the court proceedings back in the day, I mean, something like this is going to last with you for a long, long time, whether you're watching it in the news, of course, if you know the victims, or if you was in the middle of the case, and you can see that as they're giving their dialogue. And also you can tell that some of these individuals was very, very uncomfortable as they was talking about all of this. Like, you can see their body language as they're sitting in their chair, adjusting their body weight, you know, their speech patterns changing here and there, their voice is going up and down. And so I kind of felt iffy and sorry for them there just a bit, because it was very clear that they was uncomfortable talking about this in some parts. And also, just around the time when he was 18 years old, his parents split up, they broke up, and he felt abandoned. He felt, you know, his father didn't even know that the mother had took the younger brother initially, and just was tired of it and didn't want to do this anymore. And so he got into drinking. He flunked out of school, out of college, I believe Ohio State, within his first 3 months. And then he went to the Army, and he was also discharged from the Army because he drank so much. And this is where he said he started to learn how to identify different parts of the body. And later on, when he was murdering people, you know, he was like, hey, I want to take the heart, I want to take the penis, I want to take the brain. And this first episode did not get into certain aspects of his childhood that the other Dahmer story did, so I actually can't talk about that, so sorry about bringing it up, but I'm really trying my best not to combine or confuse the two as well. I mean, this man took this first body and was masturbating to it. Stephen Hicks, when he murdered him, he hit him in the back of the head. He saw him out jogging, was like, hey, I got some weed, I got some pot, I got some drink back at the crib, why don't you come hang out? Stephen came and hung out with him, wanted to leave. He didn't want him to leave. He didn't have any social skills. He didn't know how to court somebody like a normal human being like everybody else, and took a barbell, or dumbbell, excuse me, and hit him over the back of the head. And that was the first victim. Chopped him up, masturbated to his body parts, put him in a grocery bag, a trash bag, was going to take him out somewhere to throw out the body. Police pulled him over, saw the bag in the bag. Hey, what's in the bag? I got some garbage. And that's where he figured out that he was being able to use his white privilege as a male and manipulate people, manipulate the system, and just get away with it with his words. And it went on far too long. And it sucks so bad that he was so close to being caught and being brought to justice, but this just slipped under the cops' noses, and he was able to reign supreme of evil on too many innocent people. And of course, Dahmer's family was shocked. You know, they knew something was wrong with their son, but they didn't know to what degree. And that's really unfortunate right there, to say the least. Also talked about how when he moved in with his grandma, because they knew that he wasn't doing well, because he wanted to get back closer to his family, he didn't want to do these murders, and he tried to come up with a surrogate to not murder people. You know, he started going to church with his grandma and started reading the Bible, etc. So he's trying to make a good turn after he done murdered Stephen Hicks in 78. But he ended up going to a store, a department store of some kind, or in the mall, and waited in the dressing room till it was closed, took the mannequin back home to his grandmother's house, tried to masturbate and lay around with the mannequin to fulfill his fantasies, but it just wasn't working out. His grandma found out about it, told his dad, and of course that freaked everybody out as well. But then unfortunately, guys, he just couldn't fight the urges anymore. He went 9 years without murdering anyone, and that's what this documentary gets into this first episode. And in Milwaukee, there was one of the victims by the name of Michael Ross. This gentleman right here, self-friend of the victims. He was just talking about how gay life was coming alive and being somewhat more accepted, even underground in that town. It wasn't as prominent as LA, New York, or any of these other major cities. But he said that this was Dahmer's playground, and he knew some of the victims. And when all the news came out, everybody was like, I remember him from the gay clubs. And that was just horrible. And the thing about it is he keeps getting caught, but he's not caught. There was some type of club or clubs called the Bathhouse, and it was just so sexually explicit and anonymous because a lot of people was in the closet, you know, with their sexuality, with their orientation, with their sexual fantasies. They didn't want their friends and families and colleagues to find out. So it was anonymous, and if something did go down, most people wouldn't say anything. But this place called Bathhouse, you can just go in and be who you want and be naked and just have sex freely out in the open with everybody. And that was a hunting ground for Jeffrey Dahmer. But the thing is, he was able to go in there and do whatever he wanted sexually with men of his choice, but he wasn't satisfied because he didn't want to be submissive to them. He wanted them to be submissive to him. He didn't want to be submissive to them. He wanted to be in control. He wanted to maintain dominance. That was the fantasy. So he started bringing drugs in there, and they banned him. But at the same time, the cops were like, hey, we don't see how a man can be raped. So they didn't arrest him or anything. No criminal charges or nothing. Just let him off scot-free. Just said, okay, hey, if he ever pops up again, just let us know. And he finds somebody else. Stephen Toomey is his second victim. First victim in 1978 was Stephen Hicks. Second victim 9 years later in 1987 with Stephen Toomey. They went to a hotel. He got drunk, blacked out, and beat him to death. Got a trunk, carried us back to his grandma's house, and eventually disposed of the body. And those are the first two murders. And that's exactly what this first episode in this documentary went over. His childhood, his first two murders, and the relationship that he built with the prosecuting and defense team and the psychiatrists and the psychologists and all these experts, just developing that relationship, going over his first two murders, his childhood, and his upbringing to a degree. And this is sick. Now, I will say, if you're still watching this right now, this video, this is much easier to stomach than the other Dahmer monster series. This was hard to stomach, that first episode. This right here is not as graphic by far. And so it's only 3 episodes. And so I'm going to continue to cover each episode as well. This is Sympathy for the Devil. I'm going to do one for Can I Take Your Picture, and also Evil or Insane. And then I'm going to go back and finish this one as well. But it was hard for me to talk about this. It is, but I want to push through because this is just such an interesting story. And I want to learn from this because this just had so much racism in it, in this case, so much privilege, so much just evil, insane behavior. And I'm just trying to dive into it and learn as much as I can. Again, it's just sad that he got away with this so long when he could have been put away a long, long time ago. Guys, I'm trying to hit 50,000 subscribers, but I got to hit 40K first. And I'm really, really close to doing that right there, 39.6. So if you like this video, please leave a comment, please leave a thumbs up, share it, and also become a subscriber. That will really help me out. And if you do become a subscriber, this is what you're going to get: movie reviews, spoiler movie reviews, series reviews, a weekly movie news roundup show, interviews, and me talking about my favorite shows that is on streaming right now, like Atlanta Season 4, She-Hulk, and Raising Kanan and Rings of Power. But guys, again, I just want to thank you so much more for tuning in. And before you go, don't forget that my name is Brandon Keith Avery, and that's just my opinion. Peace.